Hey guys, Mo Trapper. So I wanted to talk about making wax sand again, back in the swing of that deal, and it's going well. The wax sand that I showed you making last year, it worked really well. If you watch my video on making a pocket set, I used the wax sand in that video, and toward the end of making the set, I scooped up a bunch of kind of little hard chunks of the wax sand and kind of tossed them out of the way and said, the wax sand I made had a few, little hard pieces, almost like little rocks, and it kind of made it a pain in the butt, and you got to get rid of those. So, and I did sift it last year. One of the guys, had a comment, said you got to sift it into the buckets, and that's absolutely right. And I did sift it, but I used kind of a really rough mesh sifter it's my sifter that I use when I'm on the trap line, and it's pretty big. You know what I mean? The mesh is pretty big on it. So this year I switched to a different sifter that's got a finer mesh on it. So I hope that will help to get some of those out. But I'll show you a little video here that I took while I was actually sifting it, and I'm not forcing anything through this time. So last year I really kind of pushed on all the little chunks and tried to shove them through, and I think that's just probably a bad idea. So I was just, kind of taking my hand and swishing it around and letting whatever wanted to fall through. Whatever didn't want to fall through, I didn't fight with it at all. I just dumped it into a separate small bucket and tried to get most of those big chunks out. That way I don't have to fight them when it comes to, bedding a trap and stuff. So, but it's working out really well. To be honest, I just kind of got lucky with the size of the totes that I bought. They're not very deep. They're 7 inches deep, but it doesn't fill it up near to the top. It's probably only 3/4 of the way full. So you have enough room to get in there and turn everything up and stir it around. So it actually works out really well. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to do another video on wax sand, so I'll show you a few of the little processes and things. I got a couple other little videos that I'll put in here at the end so you can see just some of the process again. But when I started to do this, whenever I decided I was going to try to make wax sand for myself and everything, there was nobody. I mean, I got advice from several big name trappers on what to do. I talked about Lee Rousset telling me at the LKL trapping school to use a cup of wax to a gallon of sand. And I had, a couple other people told me very similar things. But the problem is they don't sell sand by the gallon, okay? And you don't buy flake wax by the cup, right? So it was really hard to figure out exactly, in units that I would use to purchase this stuff, how much do I need and what is the ratio to mix. So I've got it here, and it works out perfectly for me. But another thing I wanted to say about it before I get to my ratio is what I was told as far as wax to sand ratio, I'm using more wax than that. And maybe that's why I'm getting those little hard chunks. I don't know. But one of the reasons that I went heavier on the wax is because I tried it at the ratio that I was told to try it at, and I took some of that wax sand after it was dried and finished, and I put it on the top of a plastic tote in my garage, and I poured some water into it and made a little pond basically in the middle of that wax sand. And I think it looked great at first. It was all, obviously, waterproof. It was floating that water on top of it. I think 3 or 4 days went by. I think it was the 4th day I went out to look at it, and I could tell day 3 that it was starting to kind of soak in. And by day 4, that sand was wet, so that it basically lost its waterproofness right there around day 3.5, day 4. So that's when I upped my amount of wax. And the last batch that I did with the ratio that I'm going to tell you here, my traps are usually out between, I'd like to have them out 14 days. They're usually out between 7 and 10 days, though, honestly. And I was on day 15, I think. And I'll show you the picture on day 15 of what the last ones that I did looked like, and it's perfect. There's still, I mean, there's not a bit of it has soaked into the sand. It's still completely waterproof, floating that water on top. So I know that at least for 14 days, there's no water going to get into this wax sand that I'm making now. And again, that's why I upped my wax, percentage above what had been recommended to me. Now, a lot of folks, are saying I'm wrong and I'm using way too much wax, and maybe that's true. But that's why I did that. That's why I'm going to continue to do that. It's working for me. I got no complaints. So it is what it is. If you get away with less wax, great. Save you a little bit of money, and I got no issue with that at all. But for me, after doing my little experiment and seeing that water actually get into the sand after 3 or 4 days with that lower amount of wax, I went ahead and bumped it up. So anyway, in measurements, in quantities that you can actually go buy, this is what I'm doing. I've got a Sterilite tote, and I've got a picture of it I'll show you in this video coming up. It is 37 quart or 35 liter kind of shallow tub. The measurements of it are 24 inches long by 18 inches wide by 7 inches high. Those are my totes. Into each one of those totes, so let's just say one tote, okay? So in one tote, I buy one 50-pound sack of play sand from Lowe's. Quikrete play sand is what I'm using. I take one 5-pound bag of wax sand from F&T or wherever, but F&T sells it in 5-pound bags, which makes it very easy. If you buy it somewhere that's selling it to you in the 10-pound sacks, the longer ones, you just kind of have to eyeball half of that and dump half of it in, which is not that big a deal. But if you buy it from F&T, it comes in 5-pound bags. So you just open up the bag, dump it in, and there you go. You don't have to worry about measuring anything. So out of that, out of each 50-pound bag of play sand and 5 pounds of flake wax in one tote, I get one 5-gallon bucket full of wax sand when I'm done. So that just makes things really, really simple. If a guy wants to get started, doesn't know any of the measurements, doesn't know what to do, that makes it really, really simple. And if you want to go with a lower amount of wax, you could use half of a 5-pound bag of flake wax with that 50-pound bag of sand, and melt it in there, mix it in, and do your own experiment and see what you think. You can always bump it up, right? So anyway, that just makes things a lot easier. And that information wasn't anywhere that I could find it back when I started doing wax sand. So if you want to make it really simple, get you a couple of these totes, 3 or 4, however many, you got to scale it to how many buckets full of sand you want at the end of the day. But I do them 2 at a time. I take a 50-pound bag of play sand and a 5-pound bag of flake wax, throw them in the tote, put it in the sun, stir it around until it's all mixed in, bring it into the shade, let it cool down, stir it around and make sure it doesn't clump up, and then I sift it into buckets, and I've got one 5-gallon bucket per tote, and it works out pretty slick. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to show some more video of some more aspects of making it so you guys can see that too, but anyway, I hope that helps somebody. So thanks. Back to making wax sand here, and the sand I got this year was a lot browner, which I'm pretty happy about. Same kind of sand, Quikrete play sand, from the same Lowe's that I got it last year. Last year it was like an orangish color, what you would expect sand to look like. This year it's pretty brown actually, but I just wanted to show you the difference in the color. You know what I mean? That's what you're looking for, and you can see how deep that melt line goes. So it's melted plumb down to that lighter colored sand. So, and the longer you leave it out, the longer you leave it in the heat, the deeper that line's going to go. You want to make sure you get all that wax nice and melted. Let it get really, really hot, so that you can get a lot of these clumps out. And really, if you have a lot of clumps, the longer you leave it out, the hotter it gets, the more that wax is going to actually melt and almost flow, and that's going to help get rid of some of the clumps. But then of course when you cool it down, you got to cool it down in stages, and you got to mix it a lot as you cool it down, or it will clump up pretty bad. So anyway, wax sand is underway. Thanks. Just to give you an idea of kind of the volume that I'm working with. I should know these are 37 quart, 35 liter, 24 by 18 by 7 is the size of these tubs. And I've got 2 of them here. I put one 50-pound sack of sand and then 5 pounds of flake wax into each one of these 2 totes. And whenever I'm done putting it in buckets, you can see this is not completely full, but this is about what I get per tote. So it's about 1 tote per bucket. And I'm sifting it through this sifter into the buckets. And this over here is what I end up with as far as really kind of rocks. They're just clumps that are, you know, really hard. They're like little rocks. You can break them up, but you'd have to hit them with a hammer or something, I think. But when you do break them finally, a lot of times you find that it's nothing but wax. So there's really not much sand in the middle. I think it's from the clumps of wax, because when you get those bags of wax, they're just, you know, they're just kind of clumpy, and you go through and you try to break them up as well as you can, but you still end up with some clumps. And whenever that clump of wax gets coated in sand and then heated up, it just kind of becomes this little rock after it cools down. And these are kind of a pain in the butt. And obviously it's very difficult to bed a trap in these. So basically whatever won't go through the sifter, just kind of, you know, moving it back and forth. I don't try to push or smash or scrape. I just kind of sift it around, and whatever won't go through goes in this bucket. This bucket just gets pitched, basically. So anyway, it's about one 5-gallon bucket of sand, of wax sand, when you're done. So per tub. So anyway, that's it. Thanks.